Deep sea mining. If you're keeping up with the news, irrespective of where you are in this world, deep sea mining is a popular topic. So big is the economic potential of deep sea mining that it is estimated at a staggering 20 trillion US dollars. With deep sea mining being a relatively new space within the mining industry, we can now see a galloping, if you will, as it pertains to regulations, as it pertains to companies and countries on a whole trying to position themselves in a state of competitive advantage to get their major slice within this industry. And it's good to note that Jamaica is not being left out within this discussion. As per the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, Jamaica is positioning itself to enter into this emerging industry space. This is through the government sponsorship of a particular company by the name of Blue Minerals Jamaica. The website post went on to state that Jamaica will be filing an application with the International Seaboard Authority to grant Jamaica an exploration license for polymetallic nodules in international waters. Now, just to bring up the speed, here are some key definitions. Polymetallic nodules, also known as manganese nodules, are rock-like formations found on the seafloor containing valuable metals like nickel, copper, cobalt, etc. The formation is slow, similar to the sedimentation process. I would like to mention that this definition is similar to that of stromatolites, which is a fossilized rock type, basically. Similarly to the polymetallic nodules, stromatolites are formed as a result of slow sedimentation. Its mineralogy is primarily calcium carbonate, can be also aragonite. In terms of the polymetallic sulfides, these are mineral deposits containing metals of commercial quantities, including copper, lead, zinc, molybdenum, etc. These metallic precipitates are found somewhat near to regions such as mid-oceanic ridges and similarly submarine volcanoes slash trenches, submarine vents, hydrothermal vents, in other words. International Seabed Authority, a 167-member intergovernmental body that is United Nations created with the authority as well as the overall mission to grant and authorize safe mining practices, relatively speaking, within international seabeds. Deep sea, waters beneath 200 meters, where photosynthesis is hampered by inadequate sunlight, as per the International Seabed Authority. Similarly, through the mining code, the International Seabed Authority regulates the mining approach that is specific to the international seabed or within its jurisdiction. It is interesting to see that as a world at this time, we are focusing so much on green energy and green technologies, and yet still mining is a key primary source for these latter stage industries. Remember, since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, mining has been central, and mining practices on land has been given a negative branding, which includes environmental degradation, habitat loss, watershed pollution, overall livelihoods disruption, etc. It is this same mining that, as a contributor, paved the way for pro-environment. When we're now going to hear that deep sea mining, in terms of its method of extraction, is not as invasive as on land procedures and or methods of old, relatively speaking. It begs the question then, should the focus really be on pro-environment, considering that, as stated, we should not be experiencing as much environmental damage relative to deep open pit and other categories of mining on land? If we should take a look at this Jamaica Gleaner article, which states that a Canadian mining company, through its American subsidiary, filed an application with the NOAA going around the United Nations backed body, which I believe is the International Seabed Authority. If we're going to look into this action and then to say that we should trust that deep sea mining practices on a whole will be less damaging to the environment, it will make it hard to fully trust these statements. Not only that, if we should take into consideration that the non-land section or percentage of our earth is, relatively speaking, 70 to 30%. So 70% of the overall surface of our earth is water. 30% is what is said to be land. And if we to take into consideration that as the overall human population of this world, we have not even visited and or fully explored all reaches of land through man-made or man-direct exploration, much less to physically say we have explored the entirety of the seafloor through mapping and full study, yet still to come out and to say that we would experience less or not so great of an environmental disruption through the mining practices, quote unquote, clean mining practices, is not something that I can say, yeah, man, we can just fully trust that statement. Another potential environmental impact resides in the reality that we more than likely will be disrupting the capacity of chemosynthesizers in the form of bacteria, etc., towards producing its food and basically supporting the overall food chain slash food web that exists within the deeper depths of our sea floor. Then we also have to consider that depending on the extraction method, especially within the zones that have our polymetallic sulfides, if we would have to alter the landscape, we more than likely will also be potentially increasing the capacity and the likelihood of the tsunami risk, if you will. Because keep in mind that these seamount vents act as potential barriers towards the flow of sea current. So disrupting the natural seascape will potentially be affecting or increasing the risk of us on our coastlines within regions of our world that are at a great risk, relatively speaking, of tsunamis that can more than likely be an increased reality. Similarly, sea landslides can be a greater reality because depending on whether or not we have to be altering the landscapes within the abyssal plain zone, we can undercut that shelf region, and that basically can be a trigger for sea land slippage to take place. With this kind of greater risk of sediment buildup, it basically means then that it can affect the upper regions, if you will. So it means then that higher sedimentation, it basically can affect our corals. It can affect basically the overall availability of fish within certain zones. It basically can affect livelihoods that depend on these upper regions that are experiencing higher sedimentation rates. The point: do not be misled with the statements within the public that seafloor mining overall is quote unquote safe and or can expose the environment to relatively minor environmental disruption. Due diligence must be placed as it pertains to the research, preventative methods, as well as the potential drawbacks, right? And honesty should also be a key component in the overall seafloor mining campaign.